Hello, America. We have a very special segment for you today. My guest today is Mr. Christoper Simich from TF South High School. He actually taught me contemporary issues and literature and rhetoric back when I was in high school back in 2004. So, yeah, we're both very old. He still teaches at TF South. He's actually going on his 20th year. So that's definitely an accomplishment. I'm going on my 8th. I had him for, I believe, 2 years, and both of those classes were a lot of fun. I learned a lot. And so today we're actually going to tackle the issue of racism. We're also going to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. First of all, I just want to thank you for being here.
Oh, no problem.
Especially, it was short notice. You agreed to come right away, and I just want to say I really appreciate that. I felt like talking about racism with you was really going to be very deep, and I know that when you give your perspective, it's very thought out and detailed. So I felt that you were the perfect person to have this conversation with.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's just kind of dive into it. Obviously, in today's America, racism is a lot more prevalent. And I think what I find ironic is that I can still remember a time when people used to tell me that there was no racism in America. I still remember that. I remember specifically people used to say that to me. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just ironic that, now it's almost like it's undeniable. It went from people saying there was none to now it's kind of undeniable.
I think I think the really important thing to remember about racism, the one thing that once your teacher, always your teacher, right? Mm-hmm. You said that racism is a lot more prevalent in today's America. Mm-hmm. I would say that it has always been this prevalent in America. I would say that for a while we did a fairly decent job of keeping it underground. Right. Go back, if you want to talk about it, when I was a student at TF South and the Confederate flag was still our banner. Mm-hmm. Now, was it there for racist purposes? No, it was culturally insensitive. Right. But we definitely needed to change that because it is certainly not a banner that anybody should honor in America. It's one of those things that helps represent at least in part the idea of treasonous men. Mm-hmm. who wanted to break away from the Union in order to go ahead and fight for the right to own people. And right. Somehow, in the 1950s, we thought that would be a good idea to keep as our banner because it was a pun, right? Mm-hmm. TF South separated from TF North. So there was this whole, I guess, in-joke, as it were, which was very easy for people in Lansing to make in the 1950s mm-hmm. because everybody was white in Lansing in the 1950s. When African-American families started moving into Lansing and started going to the school, they would look at that banner and they would say, yeah,
I felt the same way.
Yeah, exactly. So they said, we need to make our voices heard. Mm-hmm. And they took it to the school board, and the school board said, yeah, you guys are right. We should probably get rid of this. Mm-hmm. But see, here's the thing. That idea of racism, while it might not have been out there with, people saying horrible things, they were still doing horrible things, mm-hmm. right? In the name of, it's still okay, right? Mm-hmm. In the 1970s, I think it was 1977, if you were to go ahead and take a look at the TF South yearbook, you could just open up the cover. You don't even have to get that deep into it. You open up the cover, and you'll see a picture from a Halloween dance. Kids were dressed in KKK outfits, and they had a noose hanging around the neck of another kid who was wearing blackface. Right? This is the 1970s, and I guarantee you every one of those people would say, well, I'm not racist, right? I'm not racist, and I wasn't racist then. And the next words that would come out of their mouth is, they just need to get over it, right? And it's that subtle systemic racism, or in some cases not so subtle systemic racism, that permeates American culture, right?
So I wanted to touch on the Black Lives Matter movement again because, like I said, I'm very encouraged and very optimistic about what I'm seeing. Not only at the scope of the movement, but also like who's involved, because it's not just black people. You have white people, you have Mexican, Asian, like everyone is taking. You have people around the world recognizing this movement. So I'm very encouraged by that. But I think once again, like I've always seen these movements where like there's momentum, and then like it kind of gets drowned out in whatever the new shiny thing is for the day. So I just kind of want to know, like, what are your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement, and what progress have you seen, and what progress do you think that they're making?
So, I think all of our first awareness of the movement, it really started. I don't remember the three ladies' names, and if it started before Michael Brown's death, or if it started with Michael Brown's death. But that was when I first became aware of the movement. And it actually altered the way that I taught that year. Because at the time, I was teaching strictly American literature. And I couldn't imagine walking in on the first day of school, which was like maybe 2 or 3 days or maybe a week at most before Michael Brown's death at the hands of the state. I couldn't imagine walking in and telling kids, okay guys, we're going to read like original sources from the Pilgrims, it wasn't time for that. Students were still processing a lot of things, that they saw happening in their community, happening around, the Midwest at the time, and they were saying, I need to do something else. I need to do something different. I need to focus on something different. So actually, I started that year with the works of Langston Hughes and Claude McKay, and like a lot of protest literature from the very early civil rights era. Claude McKay's poem "If We Must Die" was written in response to the 1919. It was Red Summer, Bloody Summer. There were race riots all over the country, and then there was Langston Hughes's "Home," which is a short story about a guy who is a musician in Europe, and he comes home to Missouri and ends up getting lynched because he was talking to a white woman. I couldn't I felt like those were more apropos. We did take a look at literature that kind of reflected what was happening in society, and instead of saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and like I said, read about some pilgrims.
Yeah. And I think it's great that a lot of teachers would have kind of just ignored it and kind of went about like what they wanted to teach. And I think it's great that you made that change, being cognizant of what was going on. I think you bring up Michael Brown. I think what bothers me a little bit is that I've been sharing stories. I've been a victim of police brutality, and so like I could have easily been like Michael Brown or whoever. Mm-hmm. But I think what's bothered me the most is that I've been sharing stories about police killings since 2013. Mm-hmm. And to me, the same thing is, up until George Floyd, the same thing always happened where they got killed, there was outrage, maybe a few protests, the rage ran away, and then no one's talking about it. And so, with George Floyd, I think we had a whole string of cases that happened like together. So you had Breonna Taylor, you had Ahmaud Arbery, you had like a string of these cases that happened all at the same time. So I think that in combination with what actually happened with George Floyd and how gruesome it was really, really brought attention to it. But I think and that's why I bring up like the momentum. Like my biggest fear has always been that like the momentum dies down and it's swallowed up by some the new shiny object or something else, and then we have to wait until someone else gets killed before some real change happens.
So here's the thing that gives me hope, right? When Michael Brown died, and when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening, it was all very localized, right? People were going down to St. Louis, they were going down to Ferguson, and they were in that area marching and protesting, and there's that great picture of the guy who unfortunately I believe he has passed. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but there he is in that rage. He was throwing a Molotov cocktail, I think, and while I don't condone violence like that, I understand where it comes from.
And I really want to touch on that,
Sure,
because I'm glad you brought that up, because when the protests were happening, right after George Floyd, when the protests were happening, and there was violence. People were looting.
Oh yeah.
People were, and I used to tell people, look, I'm not condoning violence, but this is something that has been festering for like a long time. I used to always say it like this. It's like if I steal from you, right? If you have a house and I steal from you, and over the next 10 years, like I steal from you, and you never catch me. You never catch. It's me, but you never catch me. And then after 10 years, you catch me. What do you think is gonna happen?
Oh, I'm gonna pound it in snot.
Yeah, right. So to me, this is the same scenario where you have a situation where black people have been killed by cops all the time. It's been on camera. A lot of times the cops get because of the immunity. What's it called?
I know what you're talking about.
It's basically a rule or a law where cops, in a case, will get immunity. They
themselves cannot be sued
Right.
by the victims' families.
Right.
It has to be the state that is sued,
Right.
the municipality that is sued.
Something?
Sure.
Why do you think that people are afraid of diversity?
Well,
What is it about people of color, not just black people, but just people of color? What is it about diversity that, I guess, frightens people or
I think we're
turns
all,
them off? Or
I think we're all very, for lack of a better word, tribal. I think that we as a species tend to be, paradoxically, very social yet very tribal at the same time. And when you look at anybody put in a situation where they might be the only one of their kind, they feel a certain like a primal anxiety, I guess, and unless they're able to go ahead and say, hey, this is okay, we're all human beings, there's nothing about this that matters, they're not able to kind of get over that. And that could come from being, let's say like, you might be the only black guy coming into a white neighborhood. I'm going to ask you, how does that make you feel? If you're the only black guy in a white neighborhood, how do you feel?
Anxious.
Okay.
Anxious only because, and I guess it depends on the people in my neighborhood, but some people are welcoming. Others are, they have little microaggressions where they're not going to outright say they don't want you in the neighborhood, but they're not going to be, they'll be a little more frosty towards you. Growing up, I went to an all-white school. I went to all-white church for like a good chunk of my childhood. I was in a youth group where I was the only black person. So I've been the token black guy before in multiple situations. And, like I said, it just depends on the people. Sure. Sometimes people are cool about it, and it's like you're, they don't even see, no one even sees because you're just all together. And then sometimes, they make it blatantly obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you come around, they might act differently or start talking differently, or they might have been playing like some pop music before I came in, but then I walk in and okay, let's put on some hip hop, just because it.
Brandon's here. We gotta go get the Kanye.
Right. So it just depends.
You got 20 seconds to get it right. To make a change, you gotta do it every day and night. Wash your hands for 20 seconds by scrubbing them clean. We need to be germ-free for our community. So stay fresh and I gotta stay clean. I gotta stay fresh and I gotta stay clean.
All right, America. We just took a quick break, but we're back. I have a question.
Yeah.
So, I always say, we talk about President Trump on the show a lot. Even though I try to be neutral, I haven't been doing a good job of it.
Okay. You don't have to be.
Well, yeah. I mean, I try to. I think it's tough. I try to be neutral because I want to report the facts, but at the same time, those facts also are very damning. When it comes to Trump. So it's like a lot of times when you just tell the facts, it looks as if like you're beating up on him when really you're just telling the truth. But obviously I don't blame Donald Trump for racism in America, but I do feel that he's exacerbating it and making things worse. And I think, tying this into like the Black Lives Matter movement, I think that's kind of what worries me, because like at this time, I've never seen the momentum for like racial equality and justice like stronger than right now. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we have this leader at the top who is like the opposing force to that movement.
Yeah. So
I think, and he's like firmly placed himself at opposition to that movement. So to me, I'm only worried because like I feel like I should have hope, because of what I'm seeing. But I'm also worried because I know the guy at the top is not going to do anything to. If anything, he's going to put things in place to impede it.
Here's the nice thing about America and like American democracy. We have this like beautiful but flawed Constitution, right? This set of rules that guarantees us, certain things are going to happen. So when President Trump says, I'm going to, I think we should delay the election, immediately everyone says, that's not going to happen, buddy. You can't do that, right? It is, it's one of those things where we have a set of rules in place that will hopefully keep him at bay. When all of that happened, we had those localized protests, right? Laquan McDonald, localized protests. That was a Chicago protest, you had so many stories about that.
Alton Sterling.
Alton Sterling, New York protests. Wait, was Alton Sterling New York, or was he down south?
He was the one where the cops.
That was Eric Garner.
Eric Gardner's the one from New York where I said I can't breathe.
Right. And Alton Sterling was New Orleans, right?
Yes.
There's so many. There are too many. And the fact that we're having this conversation and going, oh wait, was this guy? That shows us that there's a definite problem, right? Now, the thing that really gives me hope about these right now is that George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, these horrible deaths, we're protesting them all over the country. This is not relegated to, just Lexington. This is not relegated to just Minneapolis. This is everywhere. That, all over the nation. And it's really weird to me, right? Because I don't look at, being a white guy as being, something that I need to embrace, right? I just look at it as, well, this just happens to be like the color of my skin. That's all that is. What I should embrace more so is the values that, come from a community, that come from America, that come from, my upbringing and my, my family and my students and all of that, I look at that in terms of like the American ideal, right? And the American ideal for me isn't necessarily tied to whiteness. One of the things about Trump and Trump's presidency is that immediately, on day one, he embraced whiteness. Day one, as soon as he starts talking about, Mexico is sending over their drug dealers, their rapists, their murderers, and some, I assume, are good people, right? That right there is, the loudest dog whistle that we ever could have had, and that is, Trump embracing that whiteness. I think it's incredibly telling. I think it's incredibly telling that he was able to ride that embrace of whiteness all the way to the White House.
And I think what worries me is that, in my opinion, he's gotten worse. We talk about Bullhorn. I mean, he's called Haiti shithole country.
Sure.
He's talked about like the suburbs, people coming out to the suburbs. We all know what he's trying to say. We'll stop black people from coming into your neighborhood. That's essentially what he was saying.
All right. So do you know where that comes from?
George Wallace.
Even earlier than that, my friend. Even earlier than that. The very first suburb in America, Levittown, Pennsylvania, was a community that was designed for whites only. It was, and not just whites only, but white Anglo-Saxon Protestants only. It's a very, very interesting, kind of concept of, come on out here to the suburbs where you can congregate and you can be with your own people and you can be with your own kind. Right. And not just again, because Jews weren't allowed to buy homes there either, right? Which was rather ironic because the developer was indeed a Jewish man. And one of the interesting things about that is that is a part of American history, but we're never taught that, right? We're never taught that. Those same kinds of tropes that we go back to where white people specifically have a very, very difficult time kind of owning up to and admitting, hey, I have these thoughts, I should probably examine them.
This has been an amazing conversation. I really want to thank my guest, Mr. Christoper Simich, for joining me today and having this it's a difficult conversation, but he was willing to come and have it, and we just really want to thank you for being on the B Locke Show.
Oh, it's an honor, it's a pleasure, all mine.
Coronavirus.
Coronavirus.
We'll be right back.